Welcome to Cybermen. My name is Adam, and as always, I'm joined with Jeffrey. We are the Cybermen. We're going to go beyond spoiler alerts and fully break down, review, and analyze our favorite movies. So, thank you for joining me today, Jeffrey.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to do movie reviews with such a well-researched and inspired artistic gentleman such as yourself. And you're right, we are the original Cybermen. So this week, I think we're going to be, or this particular review, we're going to be going over the movie The Congress. But is there anything that you wanted to go over with through on your end before we begin?
Well, I just wanted to say that when we started this project, we basically picked about 100 movies. And there was a lot of crossover between you and I. We had pretty much each seen the majority of the 100 movies. So we had about a list of 80, and then we had to come up with other ones that we could think of, and some of them I had never seen, some of them that I suggested you had never seen. And this movie, The Congress, I had not even heard of it until we started this project. So this movie's really a mind blower, and many aspects are pretty intense. But for me, I was literally shocked that I had never even heard of this movie, just because it's right up my alley. I love movies that mix real life with animation, which this movie does. And so I'm a huge fan of, shout out to Ralph Bakshi, who was a very early adopter of rotoscope animation. But one of the key things that he introduced to the world was animation for adults, cartoons that for the first time had a very adult nature to them. Look at Fritz the Cat as a quick example. The characters, there's drugs and sex and rock and roll, jazz and cops and commentary on society. It was like the first of its kind, and it sparked this whole genre. Now, The Congress is a very it's an adult film. It wouldn't really have much appeal to children at all. It's a very heavy, intense film. But yet, there's this animated aspect to it, which really thrilled me when I first watched the movie. I was so excited that I had found a new film that fit that genre that I love. And Jeffrey, thank you, because you didn't spoil it for me. You didn't say there was any animation in it. It came to me as like completely unexpected. And as a matter of fact, I was really, really enjoying the film when I first started. And there's all this, it's about Hollywood, and Robin Wright is in this film. She does a great job. And I was loving it. Then all of a sudden it turned like into this animated world, which caught me by surprise. And it initially thrilled me, but it was so really bizarre and so adult in nature that I had to pause the movie and walk away for a couple days and then come back and try again, which I finished it the second time around. And now I've watched it 3 times, which I think is barely scratching the surface on this film. However, because we're doing this project, the second time and the third time around, I was really focused and trying to work on breaking down and the metaphors and the imagery. But my initial reaction to this film, it really affected me. And I wanted to just comment that one of the things about art, which I think is a truism about art, if I may make such a bold claim, is that, whether you like it or not, as a, however you perceive it, you may or may not like it. But if it makes you feel something visceral inside you and it changes your, whether it's the way you think about certain things or feel about certain things, I mean, I think that's really the purpose of art, And so if you don't like this film, that's fine. I really like this film personally. But as a piece of art, it affected me in a big way. I couldn't even watch it the first time the whole way through because of the approaches it took towards like the style. It was so amazing that you hardly ever come across movies like this. But wanted to ask you, Jeffrey, how did it make you feel? Was it something? Does it qualify as a piece of art to you?
It does, and I actually would like to expand on your the point. I highly agree with. It is an adult movie, and I don't mean adult like pornographic. What I mean adult is a mature subject matter, very very mature. And in today's Hollywood environment, most movies are not mature. I'd say 95% of all movies are not mature. Scary movie, American Pie, all these American movies, uh, throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000, all the way to today, the majority of the story is not mature. It's silliness, it's nonsense, it's sex. So this movie is so far outside the scope of what Hollywood's been pumping out for decades that even myself, the first time I saw it, I actually was turned off halfway through the movie when it became animated. And I actually didn't watch the movie all the way to the end until a few years later. And I said, you know what, I'm going to just see what happened. I don't know why I gave up. I was so turned off. And so when I finally got to the end, I was like, oh my gosh. And I had to wait till all the way to the end. I had to sort of struggle through the animation. I found it unappealing. And then when I finally took the researcher approach and I just sort of drag myself through it, I start to see that there's way more here than meets the eye. And this movie has transformed my psyche, my consciousness about how to interpret movies, the depth of research, the animators, the whole thing. This is a masterpiece. And I think this is a masterpiece that it wouldn't surprise me someone at the highest echelons in Hollywood or big money, big financing would say, yeah, put something together. Don't worry about it. We already know 95% of the movies are sort of trash oriented. They're there to dumb down the human family or just to entertain and or dumb down or both. This one is not here to dumb you down, and it's not here to entertain you. It's here to tell you a very interesting, dark message. And I'm just thrilled that you and I both watched it. We have our own perspectives, and we're going to try to break this down to you in a way that if you do watch this movie after this review, it won't be like any other, hopefully it will have a positive impact on you, on your movie experiences moving forward. So this is really a big treat. So
Wow.
is there anything else you wanted to add?
Make no mistake. This film is high art. So it's kind of fascinating that this animated part, when it transitions into this world, it's almost offsetting. Okay. And the director uses different techniques with the camera, and it's just really well done. But how is it that something that's so beautifully crafted can be offsetting at the same time? I mean, that's an incredible feat. It's not easy to, really sort of psychologically trouble a viewer with imagery that is at the same time beautiful. You could have your slasher movie and stuff like that, but this is a very finely crafted film. And if you like movies, do yourself service and please watch this movie, because at the best job that Jeffrey and I will attempt to do today is not going to do this movie justice. You will still be able to watch this movie 3 or 4 times, even after watching this, and completely be mind blown. It's almost like you can't even spoil this movie. It's impossible.
Yeah, and don't be surprised, for you, the listener out there, if you watch this movie and it becomes difficult to watch it from beginning to end. Don't be surprised. It's not, because it happened to both of us, and I didn't tell him, and he told me afterwards, and so I wanted to see what his response was. And if he and I are both love movies so much, then and we did this presentation with the perspective that you may have not seen this movie. So when you go through this review, it's going to be very intense. This is designed to be watched more than once. And if you're a researcher, you're in a background as an education, or you're in Hollywood, hopefully we're going to expose deep sources and deep materials connected in the real world today that Adam found and I found, and link it up to this movie, so that this movie not only will be entertaining when you watch it without, but with this, it's just going to, like Adam said, we're not going to just spoil it. We're going to unlock this movie to the best of our ability. So I don't know if you're ready to hit the...
Right on. No, that's great. I found a better word today for exposed, and it is unveiled. And I just thought I'd mention that, because I feel like there's more of a veiling thing going on here. But let's, when you look at the IMDb listing, let's have a look at the Congress here. The Congress, on the poster, it says Robin Wright at the Congress. So she's not, how normally they say, John Travolta in, Greece or whatever. This one, Robin Wright is actually at the Congress, which I found kind of interesting. It was released in 2013, so pretty recent film. Director is Ari Folman, and based on a novel by Stanislaw Lem, very world famous science fiction writer out of Poland, which we'll get into. And so the summary here is an aging, out of work actress accepts one last job, though the consequences of her decision affect her in ways she didn't consider. So what I did when Jeffrey told me about this movie, I just quickly popped into IMDb and I basically read just this much right here, and that's it. And, I looked at that poster and I was like, and I read this little summary and I was like, wow, I have got to see this movie. It has a lot of, to me, it's so intriguing. It has, that poster is like, it just draws me in, the summary's pretty vague. And I wouldn't really say it's really that's a proper summary. I'd say it's more like a woman's journey to sort of, rediscover her son. It more has to do with her journey to find her son, I think. But it is true that she takes the one last job, which we'll get into. But I really love this poster. I wanted to, I find it fascinating that Robin Wright is the name of the actress, and she's playing Robin Wright. And there's not a lot of movies out there where the actor actually plays the person of the same name. Now, there are some other TV shows, other movies, but in this case, it's a little bit more intriguing than others, perhaps, because of the subject matter of the film. We're talking about whether or not Robin Wright, she's being scanned, and, kind of under contract law, they own her. So I just see this connection somehow. It's my irrational mind. Sorry, I'm the irrational half of this podcast, I think, is that, it just reeks of something that's occurring in real life that they're kind of metaphoring here in this film. Now, there's dozens of topics in this film that are metaphors for real life. This is a very serious film, but the fact that they're talking about like owning someone and then yet there's her name on the poster in real life makes me wonder, is Robin Wright even, does she even own her own self anymore? So
It's an
who knows?
interesting point there. I mean, even with this movie review, it still leaves the question open: has she been scanned and copywritten, and is she owned anywhere? You know, why would she be selected, and why would she accept? And so this is something that maybe down the road, the questions that we could all ask ourselves later, and do our own homework and research, and enjoy this presentation here. So I don't know if you're ready to roll into.
Well, you can see in the photo here, if you were to analyze it for symbology or metaphors, or whatever, it's like her head has like a a mesh around it, like they do with 3D animation. They make meshes and stuff, and then but it's also like exploding. So I don't know, this movie might blow your mind. Literally.
I think it will. I think it will.
Yeah. All right, so let's push into that next slide, and I'll bring you up on the screen once we.
That's great.
I love this poster. I think Robin Wright is really quite attractive, and she's probably a very intelligent woman. It just makes me wonder how much of what occurs in this movie, may or may not have occurred in real life.
Reality points are there attached to all this story?
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. So, okay, so do we have the main slide up here? Or?
Yeah, just go to the next one for me, and I'll bring it up. There we go. Thanks. Cool.
So here it is, locutus of film, and locutus, of course, in Latin means to speak, to utter, to say. And so we are speaking of the film, The Congress. So I want to thank Adam for his incredible contributions. And so he's already covered a lot of this about the poster. This is for the regular DVD. This is for the Blu-ray. And interestingly enough, this is where the technology is moving, is towards Blu-ray. It's been that way for quite a while. And it's interesting that they made this particular cover baby blue. And we're going to talk about the connection, as we launched this channel, is to make the connections between 2030, world communism, the United Nations, the Vatican, all the sort of the real stuff that's happening deep hidden in today's world, but it's there, and try to connect it to this movie. So, and as Adam had already mentioned, Ari Folman, definitely congratulations to him as the director. And there's just a quick snapshot of an interview with Ari Folman, and it's actually based off of the Futuristic Congress. So here's the Futurological Congress. My mistake. Futurological Congress. And this book, this is interesting. That little line through the letter L for this gentleman's name. What is the correct pronunciation, Adam? You're the one who was telling me about this.
Yeah, well, I've been to Poland a few times, actually, and the art on this book is fairly indicative of your Eastern European artwork. But it sounds like a W, basically. So his name is Stanislaw Lem.
Interesting. Well, one of the most important things that we're all given in life from our parents is our name. And so the correct pronunciation of a person's name, in my humble opinion, and I'm sure, Adam, you feel the same way, is one of the highest forms to respect another person, is to correctly pronunciate their name.
Yeah, when I was in Poland, some of the people would pronounce people's names in American names, right? And they would pronounce them with a Polish accent, and I would pronounce their names properly. So I'm saying, no, it's not sound like that. It sounds like this, but yeah, no, I agree.
And sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off there.
No, that's just a beautiful book cover there. Yeah, it's so cool.
I found the reason why I added this in here is because it's the same book, but there must be different printings in each cover tells you a different story. Like, the pill for the pharmaceuticals, and the ladder moving up to the mind. There's a movie called Jacob's Ladder, and it's all about drugs, and it's just incredible, all the symbology. And here's another version of the same thing,
Hmm.
where it looks like almost like a parasite, like a crab or a parasite of the mind.
Hmm.
And it's just, again, and here's another one, showing like, everything's basically to dust, and it's desolate, and there's high
And
tech
makes
stuff.
me
And
wonder, when was this here drawing made for the cover of this book? Because that art style there is very futuristic
yeah,
for back then. We may not see it that because we've seen everything now, but this is very cool art. Thank you. I love this stuff. I got a book collection like this myself with lots of cool art on it. Yeah, those are great.
yeah, it's really good. And what I find interesting about this particular movie review, I think I'm going to probably categorize this one of the most important I'll ever do, even though I haven't done all the others yet, because in the future we're going to appear like cavemen with the technology that's coming out, with artificial intelligence taking over the markets, the robotics, the labor, transportation, banking. Once this is all transformed, there's going to be a huge shift in the human family. There's going to be massive changes, transformations. There's going to be a lot of, hopefully not too much destruction, but it really feels, that's one of the covers of those books. It seems like there's a lot of destruction. But here is this man who actually came up with it, and we both, Adam and I, felt it's important to put him in here so you can see the man who it sprouted from, this man's mind. And he's an animal lover, and I felt it's very important that we respect him and those who he cares about. And this obviously is a very heartwarming picture of him. But actually, the movie itself, we're going to get to the movie, because I personally have not read the book. I want to sort of say that up front. But I also understand that the Hollywood industry is a geopolitical machine that's overseen and by major powerful corporate interests. And so everything is pre-calculated, and sometimes they take a really good story and they geopoliticize it. But so here is what today's review is going to be about. It's more about the geopoliticizing versus the actual content of the original book. Now, the title of the Congress, I want to really talk about Congress and see, get Adam's take on it, because he was interested in this too. Is that the definition? One of the definitions here is the act of or action of coming together and meeting. That's probably what most people think Congress means, like the Congress of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, if you look at the second, it's still part of the first definition. It says coitus. And so I looked up
Coitus.
what coitus is.
Yep.
And physical union of male and female genitalia accompanied by rhythmic movements, sexual intercourse, and in conjunction with comparing to orgasm. Interesting how the Congress actually basically means sex. Now, it depends who's using it. The most researched and philosophical and psychologically in-depth minds out there, the master artists, the master thinkers, they know about this alternative definition. And this movie, I think, is actually about free will and the idea of what is free choice. And it's also about abuse of that, and it's sexual abuse of it. It's really a mixture of all those concepts. Uh,
No, there's a lot of abuse that goes on in this film. Poor Robin Wright. She just, it's not even a character. It's her, and
yeah,
it's just this abuse over and over and over and over again. It doesn't stop. And so was I talking about in the beginning where how it had an emotional response on me. That's partly why. It's just these sheer mind abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse of Robin Wright is it just you don't really know what you're in for when you hit play on this movie, but if you look at it closely, it's a tough movie. It's very it's not it can actually make you feel bad kind of
At
almost
times,
in
at
a
times, not all the
traumatic
time,
way or
at
whatever.
times. Yeah, it really is. And like I said, like Adam said, this is a mature adult movie. This is a mature subject matter. And so this thing about coitus and sex and all this in the Congress, the reason why you see the slide of the Pope on here as the new CEO is that he is the godfather of the world, of the Vatican, of the UN, of everything, because everything, all roads lead to Rome. And so basically, he is the overseer of all organized religions, not just Christianity. And he also, part of his roles and responsibilities to give advice on how to live your life. And that includes sex. And he has the crown to prove it, that triple crown. Everybody who's never seen that can go look that up. The way that the church sees everybody is that we're all God's children. And so when you're a child, you have to listen to your parents. And so that's why he's the Holy Father. He gets the title Father, and he will tell you how to act, how to behave. And he will tell you how to behave in bed and what to do and not to do in your intimate life. And so even the Pope has, he doesn't want to promote condoms because we need more Catholics out in the world, right? And so he has his own doctrines. And so the Pope, you're thinking, so what's this have to do with the Congress, the movie? Well, we're trying to make a connection here that's going to become more and more apparent as you go through this. Here is a Jesuit college where the Pope is going on the Congress of Child Dignity in the digital world. So this is not like 90 years ago. This is just a couple years ago. And so just to sort of be an eye-opener that the Vatican and the Roman Curie, the Roman government, and the Pope himself, very, very interested in, the Congress on child dignity. Well, what does that lead to today? What's the fruitage of the Vatican? What is the fruitage?
Don't forget that it's also in a digital world. Well, there is no digital world. There's a digital, like, there's an internet, but it's not a world. I don't know. Just digital world creeps me out a bit.
It does, because
especially when there's children in it.
Of course. And then you have to manipulate and see, that's how an abuser comes in. They come in as your friend. They come in telling you, I'll take care of you. That's what they do, is they come in. Now, obviously, that's not the case for all priests. It's not the case for all churches. It's not the case. I'm not saying categorically everybody's like that, but I'm just saying the business model is encouraged for those who are willing to take the risks of hurting people and injuring people, because there are good people in the church. But ultimately, the business model and the fruitage of that business model of the Congress of World Business, because he is the CEO, includes sexual abuse and child sex abuse. And here's different examples of it. It's not, I didn't make it up. Adam didn't make it up. It's out there today. And even the retired American bishop explains how the church invented hell and what religion is really used for. Just really outlandish here. Multiple Catholic priests expose the practice of Satanism within the Vatican. I mean, that's a spooky background. I thought it was about Jesus and doing the right thing. And by the way, from my perspective, and I want to get yours, Adam, for sure, is that I'm not trying to be offensive, and I'm not trying to demean anybody's personal faith. You are important no matter what, and you are special no matter what, and your faith beliefs, I'm not interested in Satanism, so that's probably the one I'm not going to, say this to, but anybody else, the goal is to show respect. This is not designed to be demeaning or just degrading. It's just designed to, as you said, to unveil truth, factual breadcrumb lines and chain of events. So I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Adam. What do you think?
Well, I've set the age restriction on this channel to, not for children. And we warned you in the beginning that this is a very adult film. And so here we are, as we're getting into it, they talking about these horrific things that are, you don't even want to really talk about them on a daily basis. You would never talk about this with a child, but this is befitting. We're not hyperbolic here. This is what this movie is about. So this is actually frightening me right now. Just that I have a book that I bought, and it's a large art format, and it's called Hell, I believe, and it's all about the artwork, like this photo you're showing now, throughout the classic ages of art, like Renaissance, and the patrons who paid all these artists to make this art. A lot of it was religious, quite frankly, all of it was religious until things changed and you started to get, like, the peasants were now being painted. But in the beginning, for many hundreds of years, it was not like that. It was all religious motif, like this photo here. And so I have a whole book about, like, demons and hells and devils in art. And this photo right here is in that book.
Wow. That's and you see, this is the kind of material that the reason why we're going about this before we start hitting the slides of the actual movie is to set the tone, to help you. When we go through it, you'll make the connection that this is not just a random chance. It's not just random pictures. This is researched by Adam and me. We even had special consultation from someone I'm going to get to later, and we really appreciate his contribution. And so this kind of artwork is, basically everything comes down to the religious orders. If you strip away all the banking and medical, everything, it all goes back to the church. And the church is the original business. It's the original, the oldest profession on earth. People have heard of it in the Western world is prostitution. And so this is basically an expose on the concept of sexual abuse, prostitution, and the choice, or if there even is a choice, and free will. What is this all about? And this movie is not just about the Pope and the Vatican and sex and sexual abuse. It's actually focusing squarely on the technological singularity. And what is the technological singularity? I understand that Wikipedia is not the bottom line on all research sources, but this is just to help introduce people to these concepts so they can go look this up on their own. And it's a hypothetical point in the future when technological growth becomes uncontrollable and irreversible, which is going to happen very soon. So I feel as if I'm a dinosaur talking before this whole thing, resulting in unfathomable changes in human civilization. And here is a corporation that works hard on trying to meet this goal. And what do you think, Adam?
No, that's my favorite number, 2030. This is currently right now. When you take this presentation and the rest of the presentations that we are going to have on the Cyboman channel, you'll know why 2030 is my favorite number. I hope I say it in every single episode, but yeah, that's my favorite number. It's like pervasive in the world at this time, it's 2019 currently, but we are speeding towards this number, and this number right here, like, you'll see it everywhere. And this is the most significant of places to look for it, is when you see it attached to the singularity, because yes, it's attached to other things like sustainability goals, and you name it, right? It's out there, but really the singularity event is where it comes from. And of course that goes, it originally comes from FM 2030, who was the father of transhumanism, and he believed that he's cryogenically frozen right now, and he believes that by 2030 is going to be the time in which they'll be able to bring him back. That's where that number comes from. Wow. It's pretty intense.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's not in the slides. That's why I'm so happy to do these reviews with you, because you are a researched individual, and in conjunction with this FM 2030 gentleman, who was the father of transhumanism, today, just a modern day network. And I have some bonus material at the end.
Yes.
Those of you who are going to stick with us, we really appreciate it. Here's a chain a technological university chain that's peppered around the world. It's called Singularity University. They're everywhere.
Hmm.
You know, it's not just in
Right.
Europe.
This is your Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis, I believe, and Ben Goertzel are all
That's right.
involved with. No, I don't think Ben's involved. Ben's not involved with Singularity, but Ray and Peter are, as far as I know.
Yeah, and even if Ben Grotzel's not working directly, he's still working on the Singularity big time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something hopefully we can expand upon other reviews, because all this material is extremely important.
Oh, we
It's
will.
and the Singularity University, it's all over the world. It's just
Wow.
everywhere. And people say, oh, it's just a private network. It's just somebody's got a lot of money. They don't know what to do with themselves, so they created this. No, no, no. This is connected to NASA. Even there, people are the mindset, the culture, the corporate culture is to move towards this technological singularity. And this movie is about those things. So it's not just about the physical human sex or abuse of sex of all kinds of all ages, but the technological.
Before we go to the first slide, I just want to say, like, when you see this first slide, you're gonna. It's just like how the movie starts. It's just it sets. It's pretty cool. It's unbelievable, this movie, the way they. Starts out with her in a room. And it's beautifully crafted, and she's bawling her eyes out and being lectured by this agent about how he's really there for her, and he was always trying to do what's best, but she was just making mistakes. And you got this red. There's the red. I noticed this red. What do they call it? That flag or that windsock in the background. So there's that. But yeah. The movie starts out with her just bawling her eyes out and being abused. So get ready.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Adam's point's very accurate. I've met people and I've had other people tell me of speaking with people who specifically set up sets for each scene in major productions. Everything is calculated, everything is measured, everything is thought through. Nobody goes to the dollar store and puts together a scene in any movie, and specifically this one. Everything has a meaning in it. We're going to cover as much as we can. But here in this particular scene, Robin is being sort of like scolded in a friendly way by her agent, Al, who is Harvey Keitel. And he's telling her, look, I went to the studio and they're telling me that there's going to make an offer, and she's asking him, what are they offering? And he says, I wish I knew. He said it was a final offer, and that this proposal won't be on the table again. And
I like the way that Harvey Keitel uses his facial micro expressions to, when you look at him, what he's saying is that he sounds like he's on his side. He doesn't really know what this deal is. But, when you look at his face, to me, he looks like a dastardly fella. He's not super trustworthy looking.
Yeah, and he actually goes into detail about what your premonition is actually accurate. But he eventually gets Robin, right, to convince her to go find out what this deal is. And they go to the office for the head of the studio, and he talks with the head of the studio, and he's telling her, you were great. You're from Texas. You had all the looks. And he even said you were the promise and you're the answer. And when he explains this to her, it goes to the scene where it shows him at the end of his desk with those two pillars with the two lights, but it's middle of the daylight, like. This is not a mistake. They don't have broad daylight with two lamps on, identical to each other, opposing each other behind them. This is symbolic. And this symbolism, I believe, is related to Freemasonry. And Freemasonry is heavily involved in Hollywood. Very, very much so. And the Freemasons, it's a secret society. It's men only, unless you're in Europe, and it's the Grand Orient that can have men and women. But in North America, it's primarily English Freemasonry, and they have their own constitution, and they really have an entire business model that nobody knows about. It's not just secret handshakes. There's actually an entire business model. And part of their business model is symbolism and operating in the background in Hollywood amongst all other industries, not just the movies. All military, industrial complex, medical, they're involved in everything. And so these two towers, two pillars, are the same as the.
So I'm just wondering, where did you get this particular image? Because as I'm looking at the image, the leftermost part is extremely fascinating. On the B, I mean, first of all, it looks like two phalluses, basically. And on the B is I guess that's the Earth. And on the J, I'm not sure what that is, like the galaxy or the solar system or something. But there's all sorts of symbols on it. And how can you have an Earth and a solar system that both fit into a globe? And then you have the BJ. Now, I've always heard it as, most people call it Jachin and Boaz. So I've heard it in the order of J to B. But if you say it Boaz and Jachin, then you get BJ. And BJ is like an acronym for a sex act.
Correct.
The whole thing just has sex, it's all about sex.
That's right. It's the Congress. It's the coming together. And the coming together, again, I'm not a Freemason. And so this information is introductory, and it's there to open the door for you to continue your research. If this subject interests you as the listener, then look into this. But you'll notice that the pillars, they have multiple, each symbol in these secret societies has multiple layers and multiple meanings and multiple answers. Mm-hmm. So there's more than one answer to a question in life. And so there's more than one answer to all these symbols. And so even though the terminology BJ has a sexual connotation to it, Jachin and Boaz are the names of these two pillars. And even, for in the world of intimacy, the term jacking off, there's actually a connection to that. And so for those of you who want to look into this, here is some of the source material you can look at. And the symbology, this flower beneath the pillar, the flower represents the female and the pillar represents the male. And those two spheres at the top means the domains of as above, so below, the heavens and the earth. And so this is very deep. We could go on 2 hours on this, and we're not going to. But Jachin and Boaz exist. This is the front door of a Masonic lodge.
No, this is so interesting. Look, they have the Jachin and Boaz. Sure. But look at the top. In Latin, it says, I can't read what's on the left, but in the middle, it says veritas, which is, I believe, truth, and libertas, which is probably something like liberty or freedom. Yet the whole thing's ensconced in symbolism and opaque operations. There's no truth or liberty there.
Yeah, but that's what an abuser does. They come in and they'll say, and I'm not saying Freemasons are all abusers. I'm just saying the business model includes it in.
Right.
I've met people who have been lived a simple life all their lives, and they end up joining the Freemasons. They have no clue about any of this.
Yeah,
and they're in it. This
is exactly what the James Green character is doing to Robin Wright. And so is Al, her agent or whatever. They're saying, what's coming out of their mouth and what's on their facial expressions are two different things. They're saying, oh, we're here for you and this is what's best for you. But they looking like they're liars and they're abusers, and they're kind of blaming her for being like too old and making all these lousy choices. Yeah, it's out of one side of the mouth, some verbal abuse. Out of the other side, like honey pot, like sugar, like a trap to make you think it's good. It's like these are what abusers do. Mm-hmm.
when humanity has collected, and that's one of the things, the Vatican has 50-mile library, 50 miles. In kilometers, it's like maybe 70 or something like that. 70 kilometers of knowledge. If you understand every aspect of the human mind, life lessons that you've learned, and that would take an entire lifetime to learn, but they're written down and they're analyzed and they're documented and they're cataloged and they're hidden away. Nobody on earth, except for a handful of people out of almost 8 billion, can go to the Vatican archive, the library. That's 50 miles of books and documents. Of course, you're going to be able to be masters of manipulating the mind and abusing and taking advantage and tricking the mind. And so the Freemasons, the business model includes how to manipulate. That's what they do. They do it under the guise of a fraternity. And so even in the world today, Jachin and Boaz can appear in different places that we maybe didn't expect, like Pleasure Island. And we're going to go into some interesting connections at the end and go into more detail. What's this all about, those two pillars? And it's Pleasure Island. And it's all related to sex and sort of like the carnal side, maybe even the demonic side of the human's nature, where we sacrifice dignity and we go for carnal pleasures. And so there might be a connection with all that. So here's Jeff Green, as you mentioned, Adam. He's trying to explain this to Robin. He says, look, I'm in this situation. Mm-hmm. And she's like, exactly what situation are you in, Jeff? She says, it's going to be the last contract that you're ever going to have. Do you get my drift? We just want to scan you, your body, your face, your emotions, your laughter, your tears, your climaxing, your happiness.
Climaxing, yeah, that's a sexual thing.
Yeah, there it is. I mean, yep. It's peppered throughout this movie.
If this movie was for the public, they would have taken that one word out, climaxing. But the fact that they left that in there, this is not meant for the public. They don't talk about this kind of thing in a any other movie.
Especially to have an intellectual discussion about it. It's what they want to do is they want to put pornography out there, and so it keeps your mind at an animal level. This is spiritual. This is metaphysical. Metaphysical just simply meaning that they want to go into the realms of the thought and to explore thought philosophically and so on and so forth. And he's just explained to her that we want to capture your depressions, your fears, your longings. We want to sample you, mm-hmm. and we want to preserve you, and we want to own this thing called Robin Wright. And that's who I need. I don't need you.
Yes. Well, again, I will say that's her real name.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you sit in this movie and have all these negotiations about your last contract and scanning your climaxing, and they're using your real name? Man, I'm telling you, there's something significant about that.
Yeah, that's actually extremely rare in the world of Hollywood, where someone goes in with their birth name, or their actor's name, and they actually act as themselves. It's very, very rare in Hollywood.
Yep.
And here he is, Jeff Green. He's saying, "What do you say?" And she's just like, maybe she didn't get the whole story. She's like, "Thanks, but no thanks."
It's interesting too, because just one last thing I want to say about this scene, and it's actually applicable to the whole movie, is like how they are abusive to women. Like, she's too old for them. They talk about how she says that, she wishes that women in Hollywood didn't have to have sex with the producers, but, she would rather do that than get scanned. I mean, this is not even a real movie. This is almost like a documentary. It's the other reason why I'm fascinated by the fact that they're using a real name, because there is sexual abuse in Hollywood, and it's all coming out like during this time in 2019 and the last couple of years, and the Me Too movement and Harvey Weinstein. Right. So this is very real stuff, hauntingly real.
Couldn't agree more. And we live in a really sad circumstantial situation There's some material at the end that I want to expand upon that you're touching on right now. I'm really glad you brought it up. And so when that scene ended, she just gave up and she says, "I'm not doing any. I don't want this. I want to be part of this." And she's just taking care of her son. The doorbell rings and she's greeted by Al and this guy Steve, who is a contract.
Steve.
Right. He'll drop the contract with the studio, and he's a scanning contract genius.
Right.
And Keanu Reeves and Michelle Williams.
So wait. So they're mentioning people's real names.
Yeah.
Like, we need to track everybody that's mentioned in this movie. Go look into whether or not, they were scanned.
Right. Because
why would they use their real names? There's really no reason to do it.
Unless it's actually going to happen, and they're trying to give those who want to know these movie reviews that Adam and I are doing. This is for a very special niche group of people who want to educate themselves, people who want to know what's really happening in Hollywood and how things really work. And so it wouldn't surprise me. This is an educated guess, of course, that this is a trend that's going to be occurring. And he says that he did their contracts, and the daughter's like, wow, it must change the way contracting works completely. And so they have a conversation about it, and he says basically at the end, he says the studio owns the character. Here's MIT. It's not Adam or Jeffrey, having fun just pondering. This is MIT. Actors are digitally preserving themselves to continue their careers beyond the grave. And you're the one who brought this up, Adam. Did you want to add anything to this?
Well, I think that I was looking at the show notes before we started recording and getting a sense of, what we're doing and why are we here. And so one of the concepts that I'm bringing to the table is this idea of digital excommunication. That's what I call it. There's no real such thing. It's more like a concept. And so this idea that they want to basically try to capture your soul and put it inside of a machine. Again, that's my irrational mind just, putting some fear into my head that maybe this is all too real and it's going to happen to me and everybody else. But the rational side of my mind says, well, yeah, this is what they're doing here because, it starts with the rich and famous. Carrie Fisher is in the new Star Wars. I don't know when they filmed all this stuff. I mean, they're going to tell you that, hey, they filmed all this stuff before she passed away and we're just editing it into the new movie and don't freak out. It's no big deal. But really, are they? I mean, I'm going to have to say that they have the technology to make holograms of other people, but this isn't even like a real life thing. This is in a movie, so they could do all this CG and spend all the time and money they want in post-production making Carrie Fisher come alive if they own the copyright to her character, which I think you can see evidence for. And then not only that, but we're going to be doing a review and an analysis on 90 more films, and one of them is Sim 1 or Simone. And that movie I really enjoyed it because this idea that there's this completely synthetic, digitally created actress or pop star or whatever, a famous person, is a very compelling concept to me. And then if I apply the certain things that are sort of fairly well known to people who love science fiction and transhumanism and all that, is that Arthur C. Clarke said that any technology that's made openly available to the public, like what you're reading right here with Will Smith, Robert De Niro, all digital actors, that could be Carrie Fisher. They wouldn't have to tell you. There's also, they mentioning all these names in this movie. Well, if the technology that we're seeing right here is even 10 or 20 years ahead, we would not be able to imagine it, or it would be completely realistic. They got Tupac, and what if it is 40 years ahead? Then, wow, take a Tupac hologram and times that by 40 years, all of a sudden What matters is they have to own your. This is proving the motive as why they would do it. It's right there.
Yeah, and if they own you, I think ultimately one of the secret messages that this movie's trying to tell everybody is that we're moving in the direction, the industry, the people who own the world, the people whose names we don't know who they are, and the only access to the power structure that the average person can see is the Vatican and the United Nations and the royalty and all the sub-corporate groups that are underneath that manage this whole process, the Freemasons and other secret societies. They're trying to tell you, the masters of the world are trying to send a message to you that we're going to own your image, your likeness. We're going to copyright you. We're going to own you. And that's where it's going. So Tupac, whether he wanted to do this or not, he didn't have a choice. He's left the world. And after he left, someone decided to take him and to own him.
I'm really pleased because when I read over the overview that I was referring to in that list of reasons why we're doing this and things that we want to, categories essentially that we want to create and discuss, the digital excommunication one, I rapidly went over that and kind of discarded it. No, that's not what today's all about. I got to focus. I got to think about the Congress. But no, it really is. One of the most significant movies about digital excommunication is this film right here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's another example of what we're talking about. That forget the movie for just 2 seconds. Look at what's coming for all of us. Digital immortality. How your life's... Huh?
Oh, wow. No, this is really cool because... before the show, I got an email, and that website, it's called Quora. It's a website where people ask questions and people post answers. I got an email, and one of the questions that was trending for me today was, what do you do when you get an iPhone from a person who's passed away? How do you unlock the passcode? Well, the answer is you can't. You have to reset the phone in order to make a new passcode for the phone. So if you have an iPhone and all of your life's data is on that phone, and you die, nobody can get into that phone to review hey, let's look at the photos and the memories, or let's look at the last text message that he sent. You have to delete it. You have to wipe it.
Yeah. And this is the thing, too, is that everybody who's been on Facebook, you have a profile, and some people really put a lot of their personal lives on there. Some people just use it just to have a connection point. They don't use it very much. But Facebook will own all the decisions you've made, all the places you've been, all the pictures you've been. And basically, it's the beginning of owning you. Whether you understand or not, very few people have ever read the terms of service of Facebook or Google or any other network or Amazon or Twitter and all this social. What it is that they're capturing pieces of you, and when finally the global AI has enough data, it will know everything about you. It'll tell you what you can and can't do, and it will own you, copywritten. Legally, it'll own you. And so that's what we're talking about.
The thing is, too, it's not... A version of you is going to live forever, but it's not you. It's right. And it's technically, this is what my fear is. And that's why I like this concept for a sort of theme to discuss, is that, will you be able to opt in to this kind of thing, or is it more of an opt-out thing? That's what I'm a little bit, worried about.
One of the people who I forget his name, is a man who's transformed himself supposedly to a woman. He's transgender. He's the head of a major. His name is Martine something, I forget. But the bottom line is that she mentioned something called a Ulysses contract, which we didn't go into detail in this presentation, but since you brought up, a Ulysses contract is basically sort of like setting up a legal profile to determine what happens to your digital you once you're gone. And if someone uses you and a crime occurs using your profile, Can you be held responsible? Can your family's next generation be, your children be financially responsible? Because copyright changes everything. Just like the daughter, when she says, "Hey, that's going to change everything about contracting," he says, "That's right. We own the character." Well, they're going to own you and me and your children. This is not something that's up for debate. This is actually what I personally, I don't know about you, Adam, and the listener. That's up for
Wow.
you to decide on your own.
$25. Woo.
Ooh, I can't wait to jump in line for that,
Yeah.
boy. Some
Man.
people will go for it, and it'll build a huge international database of scans of people's entire body. Really, I wonder
For
what
20
that's all about.
for $25, I can get like 4 or 5 Beyond Meat burgers.
And the other thing is,
Uh,
if there's someone out there saying I'm not going to participate in any of this, all you have to do is go to work, and eventually you're going to get a badge. Here's just one of many examples of a company that's going to give you an employee badge that's going to track everything you do, where you
wow.
walk,
I got an
how long,
idea.
huh?
We should email them and say, um, I'd like to make a petition to change the name of your company from Humanize to Dehumanize. How about that?
Yeah, I think that's, and the thing is that for production value and corporate value, people say, "Oh, this is great. I can better manage my team." And I used to be a manager. I used to hire people. I've managed people for many years, and there are benefits to knowing what all your employees are doing. But this is a double-edged sword. Who owns the data after you've left the company? Is it the company that hired you? Is it the company that provides digital service to that company? Is it the internet service provider? Who is it? And so it's going to be so complicated in the future. That's why this movie review, when I said in the beginning, I think, I don't want to speak for you, Adam, but I think this is going to be one of the most important reviews we'll do in this entire series, is to
Mhm.
help break down what's coming for humanity. And speaking of this movie, when Harvey Keitel tries to explain this, who Steve is and what's happening with the contracting, and he's a genius and all this stuff, he pulls out a DVD and he says, "Do you have a screen in this house?" He wants to show her an example of a woman who was scanned into the movie, and he wants to show it to her, to Robin and her family. And she's like, "Really? You're telling me that she wasn't there when they did this?" And she's almost like turned off by it. And then the daughter Sarah says, "Yeah, Mom, you got to admit this is good stuff. And don't be a bummer here. Technophobia never got human nature anywhere." I think she's
Yeah.
going to change her mind.
Yeah, I think she's
As,
going to regret that statement a little bit.
yeah, I think so. And so they're having a little bit of a tussle here about choice. That Robin's like, "Well, she wasn't there. She couldn't choose what role she wanted," and he's like her agent's going off on her, saying about the choice, and she's just lashing out. She says, "Yes, it's the choice, Al. It's the gift of choice that's being taken away." And he's just trying to give her a little dose of reality. He says, "You're always their puppet to all of them, the producers, the directors, all the depression. Just don't you get it? We've been saved by some miracle through these computer samples. We've been saved." That's almost a religious term. Interesting
Yeah.
that he would have to couch it that way to her, that we've been saved, like he's been redeemed. That's why Adam and I talked about the Vatican and sex and owning everything. The godfather of the world business of humanity. It has religious connotations in here.
Hmm.
He tells her, he keeps going off on her. He says, "You're nuts if you don't take the deal. And everything they say about you is true, about your
Hmm.
terrible choices."
Yeah. So this is the sort of gaslighting again. He's not really a nice guy.
Yeah, he has a soft spot for her, but
Hmm.
his business model and his business approach trumps his
Right.
what I think is genuine feelings for her. He does care about her, but he is a businessman, and his business model includes taking advantage and abusing. And this is what this whole movie is about. And this is what I was saying: abusing choice and free will. And do we actually have a legitimate choice? And do we actually have free will? Um, And so he's telling her, "Wake up, Robin. This is your gate to freedom." And so, she ponders on that, and she finally decides to go back to the Miramount studio and to go with him and with the contract genius Steve. And he says, "We're here with Jeff Green," and they start negotiating about what she doesn't want in her contract after she's scanned. No child abuse, good one. Because there's so much of it in Hollywood, and there's so much of it in the church. Thank God she's showing rational thinking here. Only if it's in a love story. No porn, no Holocaust, no Nazis. So it's really something. Did you want to add anything to this?
Well, I hope people watch this movie, and when you do, try to stay open to like the connections and the what's happening here. Every single piece of dialogue in this movie is significant. Every single piece, every single scene and frame, right down to the very last second, is very important to look at closely and ponder. Take hours to get into this film. And the reason I say that is I just think, in my opinion, there's just something really significant about this scene and the contract and the stipulations therein. But I'll leave it up to you to kind of watch the movie and see if you can find some connections. And
yeah, it's an exploration. It's psychological delving and development, and have fun. This is the most important part. Have fun. And so here now he really puts his foot down. He says, "Look, no sci-fi, no contract." And so they do a little hashing. They start hashing all the details out. And just as a side note, if you see the logo of Miramount, most people who watch movies, including myself for many years until I became a researcher, I now want to understand where all these symbols are coming from. And in the mainstream, this Congress thing, this logo, it's basically an anticipation. It's a fictional entertainment company, but it's actually anticipated merger of Miramax, which is real, and Paramount, which is real. Now, what actually happened?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, what actually happened in real life is it didn't actually happen in 2013. It was a different outcome, but that logo is in reality, and I'm going to have to lean on what I would call a symbology expert, hidden knowledge expert, Jordan Maxwell. I see this as an example of the rising sun. It's the dawn of a new day for world communism. Most people don't know about that. And there's the Tree of Life, as we mentioned in the Ghost in the Shell. The Tree of Life will appear often in many movies. And also that star, it's the morning star, it's Lucifer, it's Venus. And so there's all these attachment points that everybody can look up. Here's a real example of the morning star before dawn. And so it announces the day, And here's the sun rising between the two mountains. And this is all interconnected with world communism, but also religion as well. And the person who's behind this, and it really breaks it all down, his name is Jordan Maxwell. One of his videos that it really breaks this whole process down of symbology and how it gets deeply embedded into all the movies. He explains the religious and historical and symbolic details about it. And this guy is not just any guy. He's a highly respected man. You don't sit or stand next to Michael Eisner and George Lucas and are brought in unless you know what you're talking about. You don't ever stand next to George Lucas unless you know what you're talking about. It just doesn't happen. And he is a teacher. He's bringing light to a world of darkness. So I always invite everybody to look into who is this man. And he has a research society. If you want to know more, this is the place to go while he's still alive. I think he's going to be 80 in a few months. So we want to extend a thanks. Both Adam and I want to extend a thanks to him. He helped provide some insight into breaking down creating this review. Any comments on your end about this part?
Oh, that's a little fantastic segment. That's some really interesting things. I learned something there. That Miramount logo is like, it just seems like it could be so legit. It just fits,
Right.
with everything. It's just natural as anything gets out, and it's beautiful. So symbolic. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of symbolism, if you notice the first meeting Robin Wright had with Jeff Green, she was wearing a blue dress. And,
Hmm.
this is just my personal opinion. Blue tends to represent business. When you're on a highway in the United States or in Canada and you're doing business, you're on the interstate highway. That's a commercial highway system to get all your products and your vegetables and everything. And the signs that when you want to get off the highway, they're blue. That's where all that you can do your business. You can get gas, you can get a hotel, you can get information on where to go, get directions. It's like business. So she wore business to um, manage her expectations and deal with the contract. Now that she's accepted the contract and she's going to go get scanned, she's wearing a purple dress. Well, purple represents sovereignty. Royal families sometimes will sign documents in purple. A lot of good and bad guys who are independent, who are outside the realm of what's considered normalcy, they'll wear purple if they want to make an independent decision. And that's what she's doing. She's getting ready to give up her sovereignty herself. She's selling out, and so it's her last act of free choice, of free will. It's one of the last choices. It's just she goes to meet her scanner. I'm your scanner, and she goes into the machine, and they fire it up. And this sphere, it's interesting how it captures all the essence of who she is digitally. It gets captured, and they ask her questions, and they run her through emotional scenarios to capture all her expressions, and everything's really looking great and things are moving forward. And then when it gets to the hard part, you have to go from happy to sad. It's not as easy to just turn on and off emotions like that. Even if you're a professional actress like Robin Wright, it's just not that easy. And here comes in her her agent. He says, "I got this," and tells her a big long story about how he
Yeah.
got involved being an agent. And here's I want you to sort of help me with this, Adam. This is the part I found interesting. Is I was the inner demon that lived off of your fears and made a living off of your weakness. Well, that's how all the industries work. That's how all the musicians will tell you the same thing. Actors is Hollywood preys on you, and you're lucky if you get a good contract. If you're really popular, they get you, but once they have something they like, they don't want to let you go, and they want to own you. And
Hmm.
he's telling her this is your last performance. Very, very interesting. This is it. That this her last performance is not acting on set. It's in a sphere, a digital sphere, capturing everything she has about her, all her essence. So I don't know. It's really, really something. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, that's a really incredible scene. It's another reason why, like, anyone who likes movies has to watch that movie uh,
Yeah.
for that scene, because it's all about acting and technology and the way agents work. It's a really some interesting stuff. It's an emotional scene too, but that's why I like this movie. Like I said, I was really drawn in, and I was excited as the movie started to unfold until it just completely changed into another world. But so far, so good. I'm loving this movie.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that scanning sphere, and that it's also a symbolic representation of the technological singularity that we talked about in the beginning of this review,
Hmm.
and how after they show you examples of how the Congress of technology and of digital and analog, we're analog and that digital world is coming together. Once they've scanned her, they fast forward 20 years later, and for some reason she's driving in the middle of nowhere, and there she is in her car, and it seems like she's in the middle of nowhere, and it looks like she's going nowhere. This is really fascinating because in psychologically, even in the socialist and communist movements around the world, they've adopted, this doesn't necessarily come from them, but they've adopted the idea, the concept of a utopia, a place where everything's supposedly great. It's an imagined community or a society that possesses highly desirable or nearly perfect qualities for its citizens, but that's where socialism and communism sort of adopted it and took it over, and they're interested in futuristic ideal societies, and it's complete. And these visions of ideal societies competed with Marxist-inspired revolutionary social democratic movements. So they sort of adopted the whole thing. And if you look up the etymology of utopia, sort of like the history of the word, for an online dictionary, just utopia means nowhere. So it's sort of strange symbolically how she was driving in the middle of nowhere and she was going, looks like somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And it's like she's going towards utopia. But here is historically one of the men who was involved and one of the founders of utopian socialism. His name is Robert Owen. So for those of you who really want to understand how we're able to make all these connections, we're trying to drill down as much as we can on the individuals, the sources, or some introductory sources for you, and how it actually in real world today is connected to the Pope. And he is a communist. Some of his cardinals are communist. And, this is very, very key here. So she's in her car and she's wearing red. And she finally arrives at the booth at the entrance of the Miramount Hotel. And a security guard comes out, scans her plate. And I want to hear this from you, Adam, because you're the one who brought this up. I thought it was great. Her license plate is a digital barcode. Interesting. And the sticker here says it's 2030. What's that all about? Is that the 2030 you're talking about, Adam?
Well, it's interesting because she's wearing red, and you were just talking about the communists, the communist philosophy behind some of these things, and so I didn't actually pick that up until you mentioned it. But let's say this red dress has something to do with the communism. I don't know, could be, but. Then you have the 2030. I told you that was my favorite number. And then there it is. Now, this might just be the frame that so far we've sort of discovered a particular frame in the movies that we've analyzed. And it just sort of happens that there's been like a frame that we both thought was very significant. And I hope that as we do more movies, we'll find a single frame that just pops out above all the rest. And I think this is it for this movie, because the way it's designed, right? So your attention goes to, the motion of this black scanner that's scanning something that's unusual. It's a barcode. We don't really expect that. So we're kind of drawn to that. But they're placed up in the top right corner where you're probably not looking. So it's kind of classic misdirection is 2030. There it is, my favorite number. Thank you. I believe I'm proved right by the evidence that the Agenda 2030 and the FM 2030 and the transhumanism is real. It's all encoded in these films too. So there it is. Yep.
It's a UN agenda. and for those of you who, first of all, this movie and most movies, it's impossible to capture all these details unless you have a specific type of mind. I don't have that kind of mind. I have to watch a movie more than once. I have to pause and look at it carefully. And so when we make the claim that we're attempting to make the connection point between the Vatican, the United Nations, and world communism, we're showing you evidence that we believe is moving in that direction. And the United Nations is everywhere. There's 193 members, I think. There may be more, but right now it's 193 members, which means if you become a member of something, you have to follow their rules. So Canada, the United States, the whole world has not sovereign anymore because they've given up their sovereignty to be part of the UN, and that includes China. And so people say, well, no, China's separate. They have their own thing. They're communist over there. Well, the UN has many, many projects in China, and China just by chance is communist. Well, it also is not by chance that they purchased a large chunk of Hollywood. And when China, the Pope being communist, the utopian socialism, all these, when you put it all together, you start seeing that world communism is real. And it's not, Hollywood's no longer American. It was sort of taken a new partnerships with Japan, and now China is sort of raking up and scooping up all of Hollywood. So Hollywood is run by communism, basically. And there is a connection between China and the UN. It's not just in Hollywood, but in real life. And so we're going to go back to the movie here when she finally gets to the security booth at the Miramount location. The security guard scans her license plate and says, "Welcome to the Abrahama, Miss Wright."
Yeah. That blew me away. That really blew me away because I was not expecting it. And as soon as he said it, I thought about Jordan Maxwell.
Oh, God. Yeah, he has been instrumental in helping me develop my research skills over the years, amongst other teachers. But in this one, we're going to make a shout out and a thank you to him. Abrahama, we're going to go into this a little bit. What is that Abrahama? Why isn't it just the Miramount Hotel? Why is it the Miramount Abrahama? And he's telling her, I see that you're a distinguished guest at the Futurist Congress. And she says, yep. And he says, well, here's your ampule. You can breathe in. And you remember how you mentioned she's wearing red? You know, when you're wearing red, and she takes her ampule and she breathes it in like it's like a drug. But when you're wearing red in Hollywood, if you're a very important person, you're a distinguished guest, you go on the red carpet. And so there's no red carpet in this place. So they make, I think, this is my supposition, is they made her wear red because she is the distinguished guest. She is the VIP. She is the red carpet since she sold herself out. And so finally, when she takes this drug, she starts to hallucinate. And the first frame of hallucination is in her rearview mirror.
Right.
And now all of a sudden it becomes everything.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This blew me away. I was not expecting this either, but I was like, what? This is amazing because, it's mixing all of a sudden media here. This is a multimedia project. I was like, wow, super cool. And the way they kind of, blended in between, there's a transition there. It just isn't right away. It's, she only sees it in the rear view mirror. Now that's a fascinating thing. Why does she see it in the rear view mirror? There's something to that for me because Soren Kierkegaard said something like, we can only understand existence by looking in the past. He said something about a rear view mirror. And it's a very, philosophical and existential. Just this movie, is amazing, and the animation is so brilliantly done. As soon as you go into this world, it's just like really is like an acid trip.
Yeah, got that right. And even when the security guard said Abrahama, and what's that about, and why do we mention Jordan Maxwell? Here is sort of like a city, like almost like that utopia that she was in nowhere. She finally made it to utopia, even though utopia doesn't really exist. And it's a psychological trick to trick everybody who hasn't taken the time to educate themselves about how the world works. And that's not an accusation. It's not a denigration. It's that it's not designed. They make us work 8-10 hours a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week. Then we have our families and everything. But they tell us that we're working on building utopia, but there is no utopia. We don't know where our taxes really go and how things really work. And this crossover that you're talking about, this incredible animation, there's all kinds of movies that have a crossover theme that maybe you've seen, but you didn't recall or didn't see it that way. And so Adam and I came up with a list of different movies where it talks and it explores this crossing over from reality to imaginary, from analog to digital, right? Analog to digital. We're going from the real world to an artificial world, like Tron. I mean, I was blown away as a child watching this movie. And I enjoyed this one too. Here's another one that you're crossing over. You're leaving the hallucination to go into the real world. It's the opposite in this movie, The Matrix. They're actually making The Matrix 4. Is that? I think that's the case. Is that right, Adam?
Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe.
Yeah. You brought this one up too. Cool
Yep.
World.
Yep. Ralph Bakshi.
Wow.
I'm a big fan of Ralph Bakshi, for sure.
And for those of you who
Fantasy Island.
You leave your supposedly boring world. The world. Anybody who thinks the real world's boring, keep looking, keep researching, keep exploring. You'll find out it's pretty wild. So here's a TV show that even back in the day that explored it. Here's another one. We're going to have to do a review on this one called The 13th Floor. Not well known. It's a crossing over again from the real world to the digital. Scanner Darkly.
Ooh, love it.
Inception. Going from the world of being awake to the world of the dream world, where you can manipulate minds, you can control minds, you can abuse people in their dream state and their subconscious state. Here's another one: as you crossing over waking life, even Doctor Strange. For those of you who haven't seen this movie at all, or haven't seen it a long time, like me, I haven't seen this a long time. Vanilla Sky, definitely one to look into. Source Code and Ready Player One. I mean, this is all about the crossing over from the real to the unreal. Here's one I couldn't help but laugh. It's such a ridiculous cover. But
yeah,
it's there it is. There's a lot of examples of the crossing over that maybe we didn't see the trend, and this is what Adam and I put together. We're trying to show you a hidden trend in the world of Hollywood.
Yep.
I grew up on this movie.
Oh, me too.
Alice in Wonderland. Big time. We should do a review on that one. That by itself is a whole, can of worms. Abrahama. So we made it to this utopic city. Why Abrahama? Well, Abrahama is based off of what I suspect is the engagements with the Abrahamic religions. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They're all Abrahamic. They all come from one man in the story of these organized religions. And who owns 50 miles of documentation? And who owns every shred of cognizable, legal, truth, accurate, information on the history of everything on the entire earth that nobody can access except for a handful of men on earth? It's the Vatican, and he manages the organized religion, not just Christianity. He manages all three. And so this place is all the belief systems. And for those of you who say, well, the Pope is just for Christianity. He doesn't deal with Judaism or Islam. Actually, Catholic in the Latin dictionary here, example, actually means universal. He owns it all. He owns the copyright of all the belief systems out there, and that's how it's being managed. He has his different flocks. Even the UN wants to get in on the action. They have a little international outfit here that has a baby blue in the middle with all three. So it's just interesting how it's all interlinked with this crazy circus world, Abrahama, where it's all ships, but there's no in the ocean, but there's no water. There's no water. It's all contradiction. But in the real world, we have Walt Disney. I don't know if you've ever been to Disney World, Adam. Have you been there?
I have.
Well, tell me, what was it like?
Pretty horrible. There's this, that song, It's a Small World After All.
Yeah.
So they have a ride for it. And it's almost like this movie in a way that it's really creepy, but they try to present it as something that's nice and for kids. Not that I'm saying this movie's for kids, but it's the two-faced idea that, hey, what a wonderful world it would be if only we could live like this. And of course you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. But at the same time, you're in this creepy vibe ride through this, it's it was bizarre because even as a what, I think I was 14 or something, even as a 14-year-old going through it, I had that feeling of, hey, this is really nice, but I'm really creeped out at the same time.
Yeah. I think a lot of children who don't know about it, they're just so enamored and captivated with all this. But as you get older, some people know that there's something not right and they can't put their finger on it. And they can't really talk about it with your parents because no, they don't know what it is either. But some of us know that there's something that's not right, and I think the listenership is they're that caliber of intellect where even though it looks good and it sounds good and it tastes good and it smells good, there's something not right. And so here's another company that's trying to do the same thing. They're trying to capture the psychology of the individual. Taco Bell Hotel. How strange, but it's out there. And she finally gets to the hotel, and she's welcomed by robots. There's that logo again. That these are all a fraction of a second scenes that you'll never be able to pick up watching. It's too quick. This movie is actually designed to impregnate your subconscious mind with unparalleled symbology, reference points that you can't actually put into words. That's the whole point of this presentation, is to try to explain that this is how deep that people who make millions of dollars as writers and editors and animators, there's a reason why they get paid the big bucks. It's because they know how to impregnate the mind. They understand psychology, mind control. And here she is in the hotel, and she meets this one couple as she walks in. Here's a man drinking something at a test tube. He becomes, looks like a John Wayne character. So he's becoming who he wants to, he appreciates or likes or is interested in the moment. And this is the part that blew me away. Adam found this, and I was absolutely blown away. Tell me a little bit about this. Tell everybody who's listening, more how you came across this and what do you think it means.
Yeah, well, I'm extremely fascinated with synthetic biology, and that's why I even poked fun a little bit at Beyond Meat Burgers a little earlier. But people don't really see this wave coming, but it is coming. And so the new food, if you will, is going to be synthetic. So people say, no, it's not. I don't believe you. Well, here's an example, right? And because we've basically passed the information revolution and without anyone knowing, and we've essentially now knee deep in the genetic revolution, everything's about DNA, genetics, CRISPR, synthetic biology. And so just to prove it, it's literally at 7-Eleven, right? This isn't like military technology that is in some underground tunnel. No, it's in an energy drink. So you can drink this drink and it will give you video game cheat codes somehow. I don't know. But it's not alone in its class. There's a whole slew of these things coming out now. And in this movie, they talk about how, we'll get to it, but you're consuming things that are literally copyright genetic substances. Well, it could be Robin Wright, because right now it's a video game cheat code, but who's to say it couldn't be Robin Wright? Robin Wright, if I have to drink you in the future, I will.
That's interesting, and I think there's a little goodie that you're going to expand on about this drinking stuff and consuming and becoming who you want or what you want to be. But here I found this interesting. You're the one who pointed this out, is that she's wearing her glasses and she puts on these lenses, but her son's in the lens. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden he's putting on lenses too. And all of a sudden they're on a phone call. Mm-hmm. And in real life, what's going to come is we're going to have robotic lenses that can be controlled by simply looking around or blinking. And here's, I think it's Sergey Brin, the head of Google. He was the founder of Google. He's now of Alphabet. He's wearing his UN blue Google glasses, and so he can make phone calls and talk to people and do it all while wearing his glasses. And so this is where humanity is going. It's not going to be a phone in our pocket. It's going to be in our eye, either a glasses or a contact lens. and she's trying to describe the animated zone to her son. It's like a genius designer on a bad acid trip.
Hmm.
But we talked about how the Congress is basically, the definition is sex. Well, guess what? I don't know if you see that fish there, but there's the sexual connotation again in this movie. You also see those two fish at the top. They don't, one of them is hugging the other, and
Hugging?
you know,
I don't think they're hugging. I think they're doing
I think
more
they're
than
doing more than
hugging.
hugging.
Yeah.
And here's the fish there. It represents the feminine, and on the extreme right, you'll see it. I mean, it's all embedded, deep psychological embedding. And so in the movie, they all of a sudden, some number 22 appears, and everybody starts to freak out and lose their cool. And she's just telling her son on the call, "I can barely hear you in this crowd." And so she decides to go to her room, and so she's escorted to her room. And she looks out the window of her room, and it's like desolation. It looks like everything's burned off. All this stuff about the UN talking about global warming and climate change and all this stuff. And if we're not careful, the whole world will be destroyed. And so we've got to protect. And so that's the business model, the advertising angle that the UN is taking, that supposedly they're there to save everybody from this horrible future. But actually, they're in the process of causing the whole thing. People in the news will hear this term, the deep state. The deep state is the dark side, the part of the United Nations to guarantee its position in the marketplace. That's what the deep state does. It actually is an element that works to build the United Nations. It is the UN. And so she's in her room and she's fiddling around, and she finds a gas mask rubber suit. She's like, "What, the animated zone?" And when she sniffs that ampule, once she gets into the hotel, the air has more of the chemical and keeps her in the animated zone. And that's why she has that gas mask. I guess if there's an emergency, if there's a problem with the hallucinogens that are being put in the air of the hotel, she has that gas mask to suit to protect her if there's some sort of problem. But moving on, this is something you showed to me, and I want you to take over from here. But she drinks a sip of water from the tap of her hotel room, and she starts looking out her window, and there's like this big blimp. And here, I want you to take over and tell me what what your thoughts are all on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this is very artistic, very fascinating little quick scene here. But, she signed a contract, and we don't really know what the final stipulations were, but she wanted to say, like, she didn't want to do sci-fi. So when she's driving towards Abraham Hotel, there's like a quick narrated bit where the narrator says something about how Abraham is a world of rage and shame. And so I don't think she obviously she didn't get the no sci-fi in her contract, because what did they do? They put her in some movie called Street Fighter, and there's robots in it. And she's waxing, philosophically about how robots have rights. And this is more like a documentary, whereas like that's the exact opposite of what Robin Wright believes. So they're shaming her, right? It's another form of abuse. But I love it because it's like Ralph Bakshi, again, we have the blending of the two worlds where the animated world and the real film footage come together to, kind of like disassociate the viewer in this case.
Absolutely. And the show that you're talking about is, that she's it's weird that she's in the animated zone, but she's seeing her real self.
Yeah.
They're not even willing to show the animated version. They're showing the real version, which is strange. It's like inversion. That's something that the masters of this world love to do. They put out a good idea and then they invert it. And so here's an inversion. So it's called Triple R, Rebel Robot Robin. And she's doing an interview and she's saying, these robots, and it's weird because It's almost like she's talking about humanity. They have these rehab centers and these poor things. And it's not sci-fi. It's like a documentary.
Well, it's not just that, but remember how I was confused by the fact that they're using her real name. I even said at the beginning, movie's almost like a documentary. Well, that might sound absurd, but in this movie, she's talking about how some sci-fi movie about robots is a documentary.
Yeah, yeah, and interestingly enough, when it comes to manipulation and inversion, and she drinks the water out of her tap, and she's watching this thing on the blimp outside of her hotel window. All of a sudden, the lights go out, and she orders breakfast, and then the robot that brings her breakfast brings it to her, and she's like sort of freaked out. She's like, "Hey, the lights are off. Is it just dark in here, or is it just in my mind?" And the robot's like, "No, everything's in your mind." And he leaves, and she looks in the mirror, and she sees herself aging in the mirror, even though she's not. She's This is all hallucination. And then she starts freaking out. She's like, "Oh my God, it's in the water. It's in the tap water." Well, guess what? In the real world, August 19th, 2019, from the JAMA Network, that's the Journal of American Medical Association. This is legit. This is not in a basement. We're talking having fun. This is the real deal. Association between maternal fluoride exposure during pregnancy and IQ scores can lower IQ scores in offspring in Canada. It's everywhere. Children's Health Defense. More evidence that fluoride lowers IQ. Here's the UN talking about the poisoning in our water. Okay? What you think about, when you pour a glass of water, you're drinking other people's diabetic medication, heart medication, painkillers,
birth control.
And that's so small, but over a lifetime, if you drink this for a lifetime, no wonder the world is depressed and suicidal and mentally disturbed. The pressure is high at work. The pressure is high at home. The financial pressures. And then you have to add all the compounds that you can't see or taste or hear or smell or taste or touch, but it's in your water and it's affecting you. There are even people who are writing documents to get their degrees on this, of how significant this whole thing is. And so the movie's explaining this to you, saying that it's in the water. It's in our water today. Even the Harvard Health Publishing School does that. And she just screams out in desperation, even though she's by herself in the room. She says, "Jeff Green, can you hear me? Just leave me alone. I'll sign. Just stop screwing with my head." And the hallucination.
So that's MKultra, right? It's MKultra.
That's right.
She's begging her masters to stop messing with her head. And she will even sign away her soul.
That's right. Because the pressure is too high. And so the human family is under severe, severe pressure right now. Severe pressure. And so the hallucination that from drinking this water continues. She's all of a sudden in a bar, and she's uttering, segments that she won't speak, and she'll submit and all this. And the Jeff Green, the Marymount director, comes in with these police, almost like a fascist move, come in, and it says, "Are you Robin Wright?" And she says, "Yes, I at least I used to be." And she says, "Well, you went too far. You went too far. And next time we're going to shoot you." And so it's threatening. But all this was a hallucination from drinking the water in her room, and she finally wakes up from it. And just as a side note, because we've done our homework, Adam and I, it's not just in the water that can control your mind. It's mind control by cell phones by Scientific American. Science Daily. Scientists can now manipulate brain cells using smartphones. And if you want to see where it's really going, Sony wants to let you skip commercials, but only if you stand up and shout brand names at your TV.
What?
This is real control. Real control.
That's like communist, like total control. Like, yes, I will, hail the government, but it's even not the government, it's fascist because it's the corporations.
That's right. The master fascist corporation of the world elites, the Vatican loves, and everybody loves, is the UN, because they can interface with the UN, and then everybody who's in the UN can't do anything because they're members. You have to do what the UN says because you're a member, right? It's
Yeah.
part of the club. It's a big club, and they're in it, and we're not. And so this is how they're going to manipulate the human family moving forward. People think this is a joke. This is no joke. And if you don't, over time, through population control, they're going to get us with cancer. Radiation is cancer. And, people who hear about 5G, fifth generation cell phones, you can download a movie in 2 seconds. Guess what? Huge explosions of mental manipulation through cell phones, through 5G is going to explode. Disease and cancer are going to explode. Infertility is going to explode. It's going to be a nightmare if we don't do something about it. But looking back at the movie, she decides to leave her room. She recovers from that horrible hallucination from drinking the poison water. She goes and waits to see Jeff Green. You see the door there with Jeff Green in the background. Who's this guy? It looks like a sort of like a knockoff of Tom Cruise.
Well, no, this is fantastic. I mean, it really just reminds me of all the kind of the classic animation. In a way, it's the caricatures, the Ralph Bakshi's, like Heavy Traffic, different movies where they just really characterize real people. This movie's fantastic.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is that she's having a mini chat before she sees Jeff Green. Says, "What have you been doing all these years?" And he's like, "Well, I was in UNICEF handing out food." And so here is how the UN promotes itself through movies. It's just one sentence. It's too fast paced for most people, myself included, to pick up on all these hidden messages, all these little psychological imprintings that they're doing. And so they're promoting UNICEF, they're promoting the UN, and they're promoting that it's a good guy, and that they're there to help everybody, and they're help bring zero hunger. They have 17 goals. Here's goal number 2, and to sort of like stop hunger around the world. And they always show the best face, but really, in reality, if you want to know how severe the game has been rigged, just like in a casino, the house always wins. Well, the UN is the house, and it always wins. Feeding the children in Africa is actually not altruistic. It's a giant business. And this is a documentary that was professionally done, and it was professionally executed, and it was top-notch. It's not well known. It explains that fighting poverty is a huge business, and who profits? Well, it's the United Nations and the non-governmental organizations. That's who profits. But they make it look real good in the movie. That's the whole point.
I love documentaries. I've seen many, many, many documentaries. I have not seen that one.
It's one of the most thought-provoking ones. It explains that once you're poor and you're impoverished and you're in poverty, basically what they do is they have non-governmental organizations come in and set up the infrastructure in a third world country where you can never get out of poverty. And so now the aid comes in, all the analysis come in, and all the councils come in, and they feed off of the poverty. And if the poverty goes away, then they don't need the UN and the NGOs anymore. So they have to keep that business model and keep the bulk of the world in the state of poverty, and so they can make money and milk the human family and abuse the human family, basically.
It's the same thing with, modern health industry. They make people sick because their profit margins and their business models depend on it.
That's right. And so now finally back to the movie, she finally has a chance to sit down with Jeff Green. Interesting, his office is looks like a utility closet. It's not even close to being nice or special. And he's just saying, wow, and here you still are 20 years later. And you see, Robin, pretty soon this whole structure will stop existing. And he opens this little door in the wall, and he shows her that the script writer, they still need these people, the people who are writing these incredible scripts, incredible animators, but they also need their antidepressants. They're on drugs too. They're being abused too to get what they want from them. They're giving them antidepressants so they can actually somehow, hopefully, find a way out of the misery to deliver. And he says, but movies are old news, Robin. a remnant of the last millennium. The mirror Mount Nagasaki. Interesting. Nagasaki is entering a new age. We're in the era of free choice. I mean, what a contradiction. This whole movie is about realizing that we haven't been given any free choice and we don't have free will. This is my opinion. But the illusion has been presented to us, and this is what they're doing. This is how the secret societies work. This is how large corporations work, advertising and marketing. They tell you you'll live forever if you use oil Valet cream or this or that. And you can now drink. They can drink you, and you can be eaten. Wow. And you see, Robin, from now on, you're a substance. You're a chemical formula. That Miramount Nagasaki's brilliant pharmaceutical department has cracked, and people can drink you in their milkshakes. Enter in Adam's document that we talked about earlier. You can drink and become something. Well, you can, here, I'll let you take over, Adam. Look, what is this here?
Huh. Well, it's synthetic technology is essentially what it is. It's genetic substances. Chemical revolution. Here we go. We're in it now.
So they're saying she can drink. You can drink her and be her. But here in 2019, we're not at that stage. You can drink and become someone. You can drink and but they're promoting it in your mind. You can be a rock star. If you want to be a revolting rock star, you can choose this flavor.
What the? Wait, go back. Those are all people having sex.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
If you go back to that one that's green, please. See the green? There's a dark green and a light green.
Yeah.
Like blobs. Well, look at it. Right in the middle, that's like they're having doggy style sex. In the bottom, there's like sex. And in the top, there's sex. They look like people. Is that just me?
Well, it's all shapes and that open the mind up to these concepts. You're exactly right. I mean, obviously, is it high definition of someone? No. But imagery, when you're glancing at something.
Oh. Sorry, no. I was just thinking, taurine is an ingredient that's listed right here. It's in all these energy drinks. Taurine is actually, at least the substance that's in these energy drinks, is actually completely synthetic. It's not the real taurine. Real taurine is a substance that, believe it or not, comes from bull's balls. It's a substance derived from a bull's, I don't know exactly how it's made, but they use it for like energy. So what they've done in this case is they've synthesized it, but it's based on a natural substance, but it actually comes from it's an animal derived substance from bulls.
Wow.
And that's why
wonder about Red Bull.
Yeah. And that's partly where the word the name for the Red Bull drink, I don't know for sure. I'm just speculating, but it was one of the first ones out on the market, right? These energy drinks that had the taurine in it. So I just, the Red Bull is the bleeding bull. The bull has to bleed in order to make the substance. This is synthetic, but that's kind of where the name came from, at least partly in my opinion.
Yeah, and this is like the VHS of where it's going in the world of drinks. It's multiple generations before they have super high-end chemical formulas or potions. Basically, this is like potion. You're downloading into your system. You're literally in your nervous system synthetic chemicals to give an effect. So he's just, Jeff Green's explains it. They can imagine you the way they like. And it cuts over to the next scene where it looks like this huge auditorium, this huge conference center with lights and shows, and there's a huge light show to dazzle everybody, like in Rome, bread and circuses for everybody, keep everybody busy while the masters change the world as they see fit, whether you like it or not. And he's saying, for God's sake, look at us. And and he this cult looking type leader, he says, I say, if you're here, you're a believer. Again, very religious connotations, mind control, religious, organized religion. Again, I'm not want to discount spirituality and connecting yourself to the cosmos and the great creator, whatever that is, your personal belief system. Organized religion is a business model, and it's that's what we're talking about, and it's just constantly replete throughout the movie. And he even is saying the same thing as Jeff Green. He says our great scientists at the Miramount Nagasaki lab. So what's this Nagasaki? This is the second time I see this.
Yeah.
Now, this is not a direct link, but when I did a search, I couldn't believe I found the School of Pharmaceutical Sciences, the Nagasaki University.
Yeah.
And look at this. Now, for those of you, again, the power of what we do, Adam and I are doing, is that we're going to give you the chance to go over this review down the road, and you can pause at these frames and do your own homework and really blow your own mind with your own research. But we're helping you begin your journey. Cell regulation, pharmacological and therapeutic innovations, pharmaceutical chemistry, pharmaceutical organic chemistry, synthetic chemistry, genome-based drug discovery, natural food chemistry, chemistry and biofunctional molecules, hygienic chemistry. So this based off of something. It may not be this specific university, but it is what a strange coincidence. And he says it. We've recently cracked the chemical formula of free choice. And I, Reeve Bobs, and here you're the one who brought this to my attention, Adam. Who is that?
Yeah, of course, that's Steve Jobs. Yeah.
Of course.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. It isn't Steve Jobs, but it's a metaphor of a sort of scientifically, the cult of technocracy is essentially what it's a metaphor. But in this case, we're into Steve Jobs' era is already over. We're now into the genetic era. So that's why this new cult of science isn't about phones or laptops. It's about new synthetic, biological, chemical formulated creatures. We got a pretty big awakening coming to us.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the bulk of the human family is going to struggle so bad. You guys are lucky, the listenership. You're listening to this. You're getting insight from our hard work to you to help unlock some of these features that we believe is a direction that moves towards truth. It doesn't mean we're all 100% accurate. We're moving towards truth. We're moving in a direction with examples that explains where this might be all really coming from and what's really happening outside the world of imaginary that's been pumped into our minds, and we're paying $10 to $20 a ticket every time we see a movie. We're financing this insanity. But here he is, Reeve Jobs, a sort of a knockoff of Steve Jobs. He's the president of Miramount Nagasaki, and he declares that as of tomorrow, that genius free choice formula will be out in the market, accessible for each and every human being. And then he demonstrates it. He snorts it like it's a drug, and it is a drug. And he can become different people and different things based on whatever he chooses. It's about free choice, supposedly. He can become a religious icon. He can become Robin Wright. And he says, be your dream, for God's sake. Heavily, heavily layered.
Wow.
And then they finally bring out Robin, the actual human being, who's the guest of honor, distinguished guest. Oops, there's like an assassin up there, and they change view, and she doesn't know about him, but she's like, look at me. They call me the symbol. And I used to be an actress, and then I was a pile of computer code. Look at those things. It looks like eyes, those Miramount logos. There's like a second layer to all this. It's not just the sun rising behind two mountains with the morning star Lucifer. It looks like an eye logo. Thanks for pointing that out, Adam.
Yep, and they keep saying, look at us, right? Look at us, and there's eyeballs everywhere in this thing.
Almost like the Illuminati with the eye of the dog, all-seeing eye on top of the pyramid. And so she keeps going. She says, now as if tomorrow you're going to be able to drink me. And she's like, look, wake up, people, wake up. Did you ever think to direct your chemistry research to the hundreds of millions of children that need your help? And like her son is going deaf and blind. And she's just warning everybody. And if you think that by releasing your chemistry to the world, meaning that they can consume you, you can consume other people, and you're giving up your genetic code and who you are, and that you're going to be able to dictate how we desire and what we desire. I just want to tell you, by doing that, you're going to be releasing your conscious, and as well, and you're going to eventually die of guilt. And then because obviously this is not what they want. They want to keep everybody in the hallucination that this is like the best thing. It's the next iPhone 4000 or whatever, the equivalent. She's being taken away by security. She says, "Look at me, I'm your prophet of doom." This is a deep message just being relayed to the human family, that the masters know that most people are going to ignore this movie. They've never heard of it, and if they watched it, like myself, I couldn't even get past halfway on the first try. It was too weird. Too weird. And so Reeve Jobs takes over to try to do damage control, and he says, tomorrow when you leave Abrahama, and because of from tomorrow on, Abrahama will no longer be a Looney Tunes playground. Abrahama is going to be our life.
And then at that very second, he gets assassinated. So
that's right.
So it's super artful, the way the dialogue matches up with the action. Like the assassin knows what he's going to say and when he's supposed to shoot him. He's supposed to shoot him right at the moment when he says the word life. So it's really incredible. There's so much going on in this movie that they don't even reveal to you, but it's tacitly understood by the action in the film. It's almost like in real life this kind of thing could go on. It's so crazy. And we haven't really even talked much about, there's another plot, a through line in the film about her son who has this rare genetic disease, and he starts to perceive like the world in this new futuristic way that has all the doctors fascinated about, and it's a debilitating disease. It was eventually, I think, terminal, but he's almost like a bit of a genius. So I bring that up because it's just one more reason why just go ahead and give this movie the time of day and watch it. If you're a cinephile, you're going to love it for so many reasons. The quality of the filmmaking and the cinematography and the acting and the beautiful animation that is so very adult oriented. So this movie, and I mean, I feel like we're kind of at the halfway point of the film, and I just wanted to just say, like, we've been recording for approximately 2 hours. So Jeffrey and I are just going to continue until we finish off. If we do split this up into a two-parter, just heads up, the part 2 will be on our YouTube channel as well. And I think you should watch the rest because we have a sort of summary at the end that's going to have some bonus material in it